What if the most powerful military in the world miscalculated a country that had spent decades preparing for exactly that moment? For years, the United States believed it held overwhelming dominance in the Middle East. Advanced aircraft, global intelligence networks, aircraft carriers, and missile defenses created an image of near-total control. But then something unexpected began to happen. Instead of responding with traditional warfare, Iran leaned on something different. Something far harder to neutralize: ballistic missiles. Suddenly, the question was no longer just about military strength. The question became much more uncomfortable. Welcome to its financial history, too. Did Donald Trump misunderstand how Iran would respond? And if so, what does that reveal about modern warfare? Because the story behind this confrontation isn't just about politics. It's about strategy, deterrence, and a technological arms race that has been building quietly for decades. To understand the moment of tension, we need to go back to the origins. After the 1979 Iranian Revolution, relations between the United States and Iran collapsed almost overnight. What had once been a strategic partnership under the Shah turned into one of the most hostile geopolitical rivalries in modern history. Iran suddenly found itself isolated. Western weapons supplies vanished. Sanctions restricted access to advanced technology. And during the 1980s, Iran-Iraq War, Iran experienced something that would permanently shape its military strategy. Iraq launched missile strikes on Iranian cities. Tehran had almost no way to respond. Those attacks exposed a painful weakness. Iran lacked long-range deterrence. And Iranian leaders concluded something that would guide their strategy for decades. If you cannot match your enemy's air force, build missiles they cannot stop. So Iran invested heavily in ballistic missile development. Not aircraft carriers. Not massive tank divisions. Missiles. Short range, medium range, and eventually precision-guided ballistic systems capable of striking targets across the Middle East. Over time, this arsenal quietly grew into one of the largest missile programs in the world. By the early 2000s, Iran possessed hundreds of missiles capable of reaching U.S. bases in the region. By the 2010s, that number had likely grown into the thousands. But for years, the program stayed mostly in the background of international headlines. Nuclear negotiations dominated the conversation. Then came a dramatic shift in U.S. policy. In 2018, President Donald Trump withdrew the United States from the Iran nuclear deal. Officially known as the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, the agreement had limited Iran's nuclear program in exchange for sanctions relief. Trump believed the deal was flawed. He argued it failed to address Iran's missile program, regional influence, and future nuclear ambitions. So his administration launched a new strategy called maximum pressure. Sanctions intensified. Iran's economy came under severe strain. Oil exports collapsed. The assumption behind this strategy was clear. Economic pressure would force Iran to negotiate a broader agreement. But pressure often produces unpredictable reactions. Instead of collapsing politically, Iran began to push back in different ways. Tensions rose across the Persian Gulf. Oil tankers were mysteriously attacked. Regional proxy conflicts intensified, and then came the breaking point. In January 2020, the United States carried out a drone strike that killed one of Iran's most powerful military figures, General Qassem Soleimani. He had spent years building Iran's regional network of allied militias across Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and beyond. To Iran, the assassination was not just a military strike. It was a direct challenge to the country's leadership and prestige. Many analysts feared the response would trigger a full-scale war. But Iran again responded in a way that surprised many observers. Instead of launching attacks through proxies or targeting civilian areas, Iran fired ballistic missiles directly at U.S. bases in Iraq. The world watched in shock. For the first time in modern history, a country had launched a direct ballistic missile attack on American forces. Dozens of missiles streaked across the night sky toward bases housing U.S. troops. And here's where the story becomes even more complicated. The missiles were accurate. Satellite imagery later showed precise impacts across runways, buildings, and infrastructure. While there were no immediate fatalities, more than 100 U.S. soldiers later reported traumatic brain injuries caused by the blasts. The attack demonstrated something critical. Iran's missile program had evolved far beyond crude rockets. These were precision weapons capable of striking fixed targets with surprising accuracy. In other words, the very capability Iran had spent decades building was now being used as a strategic signal. The message was simple. Iran could reach American forces almost anywhere in the region. And this created a new kind of military challenge. Ballistic missiles travel extremely fast. Some can exceed 5 times the speed of sound. Intercepting them requires sophisticated defense systems like Patriot batteries or the DIAD missile defense network. Even then, success is never guaranteed. And when a country launches dozens of missiles at once, the problem becomes exponentially harder. This is known as saturation. Too many incoming targets can overwhelm defenses. Suddenly, the assumption of total military dominance begins to look less certain, and that's where the backlash appeared. The United States still maintained overwhelming conventional power. Its Air Force, Navy, and global logistics network remained unmatched, but Iran had found a way to impose costs. Every base within missile range required new defenses. Every regional escalation carried the risk of missile retaliation. And because missiles are far cheaper than advanced fighter jets or aircraft carriers, the strategic balance began to shift. This dynamic reflects a broader pattern in modern warfare. Throughout history, dominant powers often struggle against asymmetric strategies. When one side holds overwhelming conventional superiority, the weaker side adapts. Guerrilla warfare, cyber attacks, drone swarms, or ballistic missiles. Instead of competing directly, they change the rules of the game. Iran's missile strategy fits perfectly into this pattern. And the consequences extend beyond the Middle East. Today, ballistic missile technology is spreading rapidly. North Korea continues expanding its arsenal. China has developed advanced anti-ship ballistic missiles designed specifically to threaten U.S. aircraft carriers. Even smaller countries are investing heavily in missile and drone capabilities. The lesson many military planners have learned is simple. Precision missiles can challenge even the most powerful militaries. And that raises an uncomfortable question about the Trump administration's strategy. Did maximum pressure underestimate how Iran would respond? Economic sanctions were intended to weaken Iran's position. But instead, they may have accelerated military innovation. Iran doubled down on missile development. It improved guidance systems, it expanded production, and it deepened cooperation with regional allies capable of launching similar weapons. In other words, pressure did not eliminate the threat. It arguably made it more central to Iran's strategy. Even today, tensions surrounding Iran's missile program remain unresolved. Negotiations continue to stall. Sanctions remain in place. And the missile arsenal keeps growing.